Heroes was a Pakistani Christian by the name of Shahbaz Bhatti.
Knox Thames works for the U.S. State Department. His job? To help stop the persecution of Christians, following in the footsteps of his hero, Shahbaz Bhatti.
And tragically, Pakistani Taliban murdered him outside his mother's home in Islamabad.
Knox Thames is our guest on this episode of GPS, God, People, Stories. He's going to share how he lives out his faith in Christ through his job. I'm Jim Kirkland.
And I'm Phil Fleischman. You're also going to hear Billy Graham talk about persecuted Christians.
Thousands of Christians are actually suffering in several parts of the world at this hour. Some are suffering the loss of their liberty. Some are suffering torture and even death.
Christians around the world have been willing to face torture and even death for centuries because they know Jesus Christ suffered and died for them. If you'd like to learn more about starting your own relationship with Jesus, check out our website, findpeacewithgod.net. That's findpeacewithgod.net.
GPS.
God.
People. Stories.
I'm the Special Advisor for Religious Minorities in the Near East and South Central Asia at the U.S. Department of State.
Try saying that job title 5 times fast. A few years ago, the position didn't exist. President Obama created it within the U.S. State Department in 2014, and Knox Thames took on the role about a year later.
I focused a lot on Iraq, but also places like Pakistan, Syria, Nepal, Egypt. Constantly thinking, working about how the United States can help promote religious freedom. And I've tried to take a holistic approach, of course, focusing on persecuted Christians, but other communities that have also been victimized. And it's been a challenging role, but one I've was asked to continue into the Trump administration.
So what exactly does Knox do?
Direct engagement with both governments and communities at risk. So in the last 19 months, I've traveled to 20 different countries, been to Iraq twice, been to Pakistan twice, and each country context is different. So in a place like Iraq, the government is not the main problem, it's ISIS. And so we're hearing, it's meeting with the Christian communities, the Yazidi communities, the other unique faith groups to Iraq to hear their concerns, to think about what role can the United States play to recreate conditions where minorities feel like they have a future in that country. Elsewhere, where the government is a violator, it's talking directly with them and expressing that the United States is deeply troubled by the government's laws and policies, and we urge them to change.
Those conversations with government officials aren't easy. More often than not, political leaders aren't really open to hearing what Knox has to say.
A lot of times it's denial, or you don't understand, or sometimes they'll simply just try to talk the whole time so I can't make my points because they know what I want to talk about. The State Department issues an annual report on religious freedom in every country in the world, and these foreign governments pay a lot of attention to it. So they know what our concerns are. Then someone like myself at this envoy role coming in to really make crystal clear what we want to see happen.
When Knox does ask foreign governments to take action against religious persecution in their country, the response isn't always positive.
But in some cases, there are government officials who are on board with protecting people's rights to freely practice Christianity. For example,
one of my personal heroes, and a picture of whom I have on my credenza in my office, was a Pakistani Christian by the name of Shahbaz Bhatti. He was a longtime advocate for the rights of Christians in Pakistan, and under the previous government, this was about 8 years ago, he was made a cabinet minister focusing on minority affairs. And he bravely spoke out against Pakistan's blasphemy law, which is really problematic. He spoke out about the case of Asia Bibi, this Christian mother who's been sentenced to death for the so-called crime of blasphemy.
Shahbaz received death threats, but he continued on with his work. Then, in 2011,
tragically, Pakistani Taliban murdered him outside his mother's home in Islamabad. But he had this very telling video interview about a month before where he said, I know the threats that I'm facing, but I'm so committed to this work. I'm so committed to my God and feel like this is my calling to help Christians, to help other minorities in Pakistan, I'm not afraid. And he paid the ultimate cost for that.
Part of the motivation behind Shahbaz Bhatti's assassination was the Taliban's belief that he had violated Pakistan's very strict blasphemy laws.
Those laws don't allow any speech or demonstrations against the Islamic faith. Shahbaz Bhatti refused to follow those rules and continued to share the message of Christ until the day he was killed.
I think it's a powerful reminder of the importance of courage, but also a challenge to all of us who care about religious freedom, that we don't let his death be in vain, that he held a candle in a very dark place and it was snuffed out, but then that we light other candles. And so I'm inspired by him, I'm challenged by him, and I always think, I hope I do my job half as good as he did his.
But perhaps the biggest motivation for Knox to do his job well is his personal relationship with Jesus Christ.
I'm a Christian, and part of my attempt to live out the teachings of Jesus is to do this work, to advocate for religious freedom for everyone. That's my personal motivation, and I'm proud that our country is an American value, and the United States is committed to this cause of religious freedom for all.
Knox also draws his inspiration from the parable of the Good Samaritan,
where Jesus was illustrating what does it really mean to love your neighbor. And the Samaritan was the hero. And the Samaritan crossed over religious and ethnic boundaries to save someone who'd been attacked by robbers. And then the message was, go and do likewise.
FindPeaceWithGod.net.
And when you're there on the site, there are resources to help you live the Christian life. And if you want to know more about starting a relationship with Jesus Christ, we can help you with that too. The website again is FindPeaceWithGod.net.
Knox Thames relies on the power of prayer when he works with persecuted Christians. And in just a minute, he'll share how you can be praying for him and for the work he's doing.
You're listening to GPS, God, People, Stories, a podcast production of the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association.
Thousands of Christians are actually suffering in several parts of the world at this hour. Some are suffering the loss of their liberty. Some are suffering torture and even death.
Billy Graham, 1967, talking about something that's still happening today.
In the past 20 years, it is estimated that more people have been martyred because of their faith in Jesus Christ than in all the persecutions of the Roman Empire of the first century put together. It is true that salvation is free, but discipleship costs everything. It is true that very few of us would volunteer to endure physical suffering, but this is precisely what Jesus promises, and he asks it of us.